Oh yeah, it went on and on and on.
Yeah.
Keep water in quarter. They told him to lay low, but just.
All right, I have 6:02
And he
now.
wouldn't.
So I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Atherton Government Study Commission for Monday, January 13. The first item on the action item on the agenda is the pledge of allegiance to the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all.
Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Eccles? Here. Ms. Green? Here. Mr. Foots?
Here.
Vice Chairman Fiore?
Here.
Chairman Dippo?
Here. The next item on the agenda is public comment. This is time for a member of the public wishing to comment on any agenda item to please do so. Is there any public commentary? This should reflect the opportunities provided, none is taken. Item 5 on tonight's agenda is adoption of the December 2, 2013 meeting minutes that were circulated electronically. I'll entertain a motion to adopt them. Ms. Green, second by Dr. Duncan. Any discussion? All in favor of adopting, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Adoption of the 2014 meeting schedule. Your packet contains a handy calendar and a proposed meeting schedule. This is somewhat at variance with what we discussed during our meeting in December, in that beginning in March, we switched from the first and third Mondays from the second and fourth Mondays. This was suggested to us because of conflicts that would arise with City Council strategic planning sessions. So if you look at calendars back in December and thought everything was swell, just take a close look to make certain that this would work. Or I guess we'll just open the floor for discussion regarding the proposed schedule.
Why is there a purple on the 20th of May?
I guess this is for your later discussion, I guess, but it's the elections. It's a primary.
Okay.
I would prefer that the meetings all be standardized. However, tell me again what the variance is in March and why they're switched.
Beginning in March and continuing throughout June, it looks like we go from the second and fourth Mondays to the first and third Mondays. So after March, it's always the first and third. And that was just suggested because if we were to keep it the second and fourth Mondays, we would be conflicting with City Council strategic planning sessions.
Only beginning in March, not February.
Correct.
And
this allows us to avoid the President's Day holidays by keeping it second and fourth of January.
And you get taken by them before you get to come to us. And
Plus they're
they
here,
can't
their
attend.
meetings are here too.
They're here and
Strategic
they
planning.
want to attend our meeting, so
They're kind
okay,
of
well, that settles that.
3 strikes against us.
Are you okay with that?
I'm okay with
They're the
that.
bullies, they get to push us around.
I might have one conflict, but it's not worth worrying about.
I have 2 conflicts.
Trying to schedule all the controversial stuff that night.
Same conflict as mine.
All right, so we have the proposed commission schedule. Bob, did you speak up on that? Are you okay? So we'll entertain the meeting to adopt that as the meeting schedule and ask the city clerk to advertise his council needs when appropriate. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second by Mr. Foots. Any further discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Discussion of the proposed process for creating a charter. Linda passed out, I think it was Linda passed out the 3 charters we had requested at the last meeting, those being McKeesport, Lebanon, and City of Easton. And you have those in front of you now. And I think David had circulated an email.
Only to the chair and the
Appropriately
vice chair.
circulated, okay. Questioning how this is done and what's right, and I think Larry, if I read his response, indicated that he or his law firm would sort of be the overall scrivener of the charter, if I'm summarizing incorrectly, speak up, and that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm. He said that would be up to us, but that's okay with
But
me.
they were willing to, they were willing to do it, but it's our, we can do whatever we wanted, but they were willing to serve.
Right.
Which to me made, like I said, a lot of sense. So that I think is one hurdle that we discussed before that I would think would be out of the way. Then if we focus on, what's going to be the content of it, my thoughts on it, let me just, does anyone else have anything they wanted to flesh out on this? I have something to sort of comment on, but
On this one?
on how we're going to, what the procedure will be and how we put this thing together.
You start, and then I'll start.
What I did was, I got it condensed to 1 page, and just printed this off literally, it might even still be warm, before we got here. And all I did here,
Thank you.
anybody wants to see those over there, they'll look at it. There's nothing magical here at all. I took Easton's charter, actually, figured out and only took the content headlines. And it broke down to they have 9 articles in the preamble. And this is how they break just the articles down. There's not a bit of content here. And what I thought we could do is look at this and look at the other charters we have solely for the purpose of, are these 11 articles covering everything that we feel would ultimately need to be covered? And if so, we could just start proceeding through these articles just as a generic basic outline. I didn't even go so far as to go in and do the subsections. I didn't think that was fair because
Subsections vary quite a bit.
correct, and that would steer to one direction or another. What I was trying to do was come up with sort of a very broad outline that hopefully would cover everything that ultimately needs to be covered broadly to give us a means of starting to get through the document. I couldn't find anything looking at, and I didn't have these other ones, but I had some electronic ones that Lynn said, that this fails to cover in terms of the broad categories. And I guess we'd always have the option, if we get down the street and say, you know what, we need to add an article, a 10th article, we're going to stick it here, we could always move it around. But what I was just trying to do was give us something very rudimentary to start building on, because we've got to start somewhere. So that is my only purpose without hidden agenda, although I'll tell you I really like Easton Charter. I'd be content to go out Easton and bring it up here.
Well, I can tell you that I like it, especially based on my email. And I drafted an email, I sent it to Larry to respond to some questions. I didn't email it to everybody. I didn't want to either, have a meeting. But Larry got back and said, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. We can do it any way we want. But I'm glad you were thinking of a structured approach as opposed to just free association everybody do the right thing, because I think this would be the only way to really do it well. Now, the other thing is, Larry said, and I just find this hard to believe, that there's no pre-formatted legal outline. And I just, it's almost incomprehensible that that does not
Founding fathers
exist.
didn't have an outline, they're just
Yeah, that was 200 years ago or more. It's the 21st century. I mean, and I've been on the internet looking, and I can't find anything
We have
either.
about 14 outlines here, it's just pick which one you want to start from.
So, and I think this is great. I think if you went through and identified these structured categories for potential content, I think that's exactly how it should be done. I do think we should have individuals who, or an individual, and I don't know who that might be, to go through all of the charters that we have. Unless you have done this one. I haven't done it either. Now, maybe Richard has. He's got a big
Two, she had the ball plate for
and see what the variances are. In other words, you could have like a matrix,
Well-
cities across, and they have this, they don't have this.
And I think that we have an opportunity to do that as we hit each section, so that if we're planning in advance, maybe the next meeting we're hitting powers of the city, which is a fairly small section, at least in Easton's, we would be able to look at other charters and say, okay, here are sort of the options that are available. And the other reason, by the way, I took Easton, not just because I like it, I think it's the most recent.
Why do you like it?
It's sort of a hybrid, but it's not clear cut one way or the other, and I think they had the benefit of, I'm assuming, learning as we had, being last, they had the benefit of looking at everybody else's at the time. And I think that somebody described it as a hybrid, I would agree with that, was that one area? Is that Pulaski that said that? I think it might have been Grant Pulaski who described it as sort of a hybrid, which like between strong air and
I think I do like Easton's to some degree. I think I would want to have some potential interviews with some people from Easton before we get too far down that road, because actually, on the face, you may think of Allentown as being more power to the mayor, but I tend to think Easton actually is the leader, but he's also one of the votes in the legislative branch. So there isn't a clear division of power here in Easton, although it resembles something more similar to what we have currently. The potential mayor might be the greatest power of any of these.
But again,
But that's separate. That's a
That's a
topic
separate
within.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with the premise of the 9 separate topics to discuss those sorts of issues within. As a matter of schedule, because one of the things I see going through this is you can sort of talk about each of them in a microcosm, but there's going to be some that will be interdependent on the others. And I think that there's going to be some getting through the 9 and then going back and tweaking the 9. I don't know if you do that within each meetings, or do you try to knock off 2 at a time so that you have enough time? Because this would take us through May if we took one a week.
well, yeah, but here's
One
the
a meeting.
thing, some of them are small,
Yeah, cookie cutter thing.
and some of them are
Long,
10
controversial.
pages.
Yeah.
I think Easton's chart, what was it, 38 pages?
Yeah.
36. And if you look at this, you'll see chapter 1, the powers of the city, takes an entire half page. And then
Some of these have, the way I see it is if we're talking powers of the city at the next meeting, some of these have many more powers enumerated, and those are the kind of things you'd highlight up and say, we want to add or deduct these from the Easton. So I agree with the basic premise of taking 1 or 2 of these topics per meeting, sort of study from within the bulk of them and come to that meeting and say what you do or don't like.
we all know our homework assignment for the next meeting to start getting ready and analyzing that, but it's gonna take a little bit of work between meetings to get prepared to say, hey, whoever, Johnstown does this better, or have we looked at the language in this one versus.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like one example I saw in reading Easton's in particular is when you get down there to the, what part about
referendums on the ballot, they're the only ones that I saw that gave limitations to what could be in the referendum, whereas most of the other ones were said, here's the process, everything's fair
The
game.
referendum is, I'd love to know where they got that, whether that's.
Yeah, they limited-
state law, or it's very detailed.
Yeah, very detailed, very limited to the scope, that these things are not applicable to referendum. I'm not really sure they can do that, because the referendum can change the
That's
charter,
why we need
which would
Larry.
change you could change the language of the referendum by referendum.
So that might have been a hot topic for Easton at the time when they wrote the charter.
Yeah, or like you said, they just did theirs in about 2006, 2007, 2008. So they may have interviewed some people that said, hey, we wish they couldn't change these things
Or
by
maybe there's
referendum.
case law that came down,
Yeah.
or what have you. Again, there's no matter, I just,
Yeah, I
being
just throw
overly
it out
honest,
there.
saying I like Easton, but I didn't pick, I just like this structure to start us with, and however we get there. I wasn't thinking of it, but maybe we do say, hey, next time we do powers of the city, everyone come prepared to, go through that section. And the goal is, I don't know if we can get to the, like, at least in Easton City Council, Article 2 and Article 3, the mayor, there's a lot of overlap, and they're both really long. So I don't know that we could possibly,
And I think
some
that-
of these are just gonna take forever, and some of them are gonna be quick.
And I think that in general, as a matter of how this group wants to proceed, some of these, like we were discussing before the meeting started, some of these are very descriptive and to say, these are the departments you will have, these are how those departments will function. Some are very generic and don't even mention anything about most departments, and we'll let it up to the city council. So, I think that the overall, we probably need to discuss at some point the overall tone that we're going to try to strike here. Are we going to have a very flexible charter that leaves a lot of power in the hands of the future city councils, or are we going to, in some ways, make a charter that somewhat micromanages some of those things and dictates how we think that they should structure government?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think when you engage in a process like this, you might want to establish some conceptual parameters for bouncing around in. And I would think one would be brevity, and another would be not an overly great detail, in as much as, if the charter lasts for 20 years, it's going to be very naive on our part and presumptuous to be making detailed or micromanagement statements in a charter in 2014 that might last for 20 years. And the context 20 years from now might be radically different. So I think the more generic, the more appropriate, the more legal, the more brief, and maybe some other adjectives that we work with, the better job we will do.
And
I want to kind of second that, because I also think that the voters sent us here to figure out whether we should have a home rule and to write the charter for that, but they didn't send us here to be like a second city council to go and do the things
To run the
which
city.
really
We're
the
not
city
here
should
to-
be doing, right? And as an example, I'll just throw one out there. I think it was Allentown's that specified land value taxes over the next 5 years. I mean, that would clearly be something we
Overstepping.
should not be talking about, stuff like that.
Yeah, now, like when you are talking about departments, the third-class city, I think the one other line that we need, some opinion on, Larry could probably do that, is when we go less far than what the third-class city goes, what kind of vacuum do we possibly create, or what kind of power, how does the transition happen in those cases? So, you could go very stringent and say you will have all these departments and they will be staffed in this way, or we could say nothing about the departments and leave it up to the city council, but that may be less than what the third-class city code has, so there's going to need to be a transition, and there'll be a flexibility for the future city council to rearrange the shape of city government from what exists today, which is dictated by the third-class city code.
That being said, Larry in this email did indicate a willingness to participate as much as possible. Do we need to be inviting him to all future meetings, or how's he going to handle that?
I think it'll make us more efficient if you would be here.
Once we finish each section, unless we have to go back, like you said, because some might become on the other, we need to keep moving forward, so
I mean, we're always gonna
Having
be,
Larry here.
if he's not here, we're going to discuss all these things, some of which may be wrong, have him review it before the next one, and have to rediscuss it because we were misleading ourselves.
I think our message is we kind of need to hear as much as we possibly can do.
I would think that's going to be a prudent use of ours and his time.
So the preamble could actually state our approach to the creation of the charter, whatever that is.
I don't know if that's appropriate for preamble or not, to be honest with you.
I'm thinking 20 years from now, people are gonna say, well, you know, what were they thinking?
Well, each one of these has a preamble, or most of them do. I don't think they necessarily say what the charter tries to accomplish, and I guess,
I also don't even have to do the preamble first or last.
yeah, I think it's a summary of what you do.
Yeah, you almost have to
What,
do the preamble last.
He's saying right on June 16th.
Or read some of the preambles and see what we're saying. It
Okay.
almost says
Yeah, I
it's
haven't
done,
read.
but-
I don't think that most of them do. I think actually most of them do not have a preamble.
Not necessarily at the front, but there's some statement as to,
I mean, a lot of them have like a definition of powers, and they just say, you know, pursuant to the Constitution and the laws of the Commonwealth and the General Assembly, we, whatever.
Other comments or thoughts? Do we want to sort of use this outline and then say that the next meeting, or whether we do preamble or not, preamble and the powers of the city would be our next step?
Yeah.
Could start somewhere, so we.
Yeah.
All right, then I'll entertain a motion we sort of, that we adopt this as a preliminary charter outline and proceed as we've discussed. David, any second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Proposed schedule, did you say you checked through the meetings and this gets us through May?
I'm just saying. Yeah, well, I counted 9, starting at 27th, and that would get you to May 19th. I don't know, though, that some of these won't be 2 topics per meeting versus others that may be 1, I don't know.
Or
Or
two
maybe
meetings
some
per
meetings.
topic?
Yeah,
Yeah, 2
some
meetings.
That's what I
Or,
was-
well, yeah, that as well. Yeah, and I think that there's some framework type things here that general discussion is going to be needed to at least set the course.
But looking over your shoulder there.
Consensus.
So we would have 3 meetings for some give and take.
You mean, well, 9 takes
Well,
you
we-
here. Maybe 2 left.
Two to be taken.
Well,
I was
yeah.
counting tonight.
Schedule-wise, though, I don't know if we got an answer or who we need to talk to, or if Larry can answer it. What is the date that we have to have the referendum to?
I'll send them an email about that.
What's the last date we can have the question in place? Now, okay, that's the last date the question has to be in place. How long before that do we need to have the charter, and when does our final report fall in line with all that, those sorts of things?
Yeah, because that'll back us up into the.
Because the way I understood it, that the final report includes the charter, so the final report's actually done presumably after the charter is completed.
What we had to have 60 days before, Labor Day.
We're presuming that, then that the actual advertising rules.
Well, if the election's November 5, we're not using July, we would still have 90 days, kind of
Right.
all of August to come up. God, it's more than 90 days.
We should be very safe.
Gotta be safe, even in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no, I agree. If it's 90 days, it gives us to about here to finalize, it gives you about June 16th to finalize the charter, and then it gives you hopefully just part of July, maybe August to write the final report.
Larry suggested that we look at other final reports, so he asked me to go on and get some from you and give them to you. Cause he said they have to be there somewhere, he thinks they would be within DCED.
I'm sure he's thinking we can get us all
So-
those, yeah. That's a good point. I'm still inclined to say, let's try and assign on the schedule, let's try and do, have a goal of at least one of these meetings.
Yeah, I think that
Then we have
that
the
and
safety
then,
valve of 2 already. And we probably have 2 meetings. We probably have July too, at least July.
well, it's gonna take at least 2 meetings, I think, for a final report.
You know, I have no problem with that, but how does a person like me understand like Article 6 elections? How do I know how elections should be done? I'm gonna have to depend on somebody's professional judgment to give me a recommendation.
Well, I think that's the homework in between where you're reading how other charters have done it. You've listened to, and as Richard said, we might in advance, it's, want to bring people in from other municipalities still. I mean, nothing keeps us from still bringing people in to say, how does this work? Or how did you do it, or why did you do this?
Yeah, as I said, I would have no preference about elections because I don't know anything about it, and I don't know that I'd have any preference. Maybe if I listened to somebody, I would come up with a preference, but that would be like a
Or you
section
read
that
4 different charters and say, well, this one it makes more sense to me, or makes you ask questions.
I'm not sure how I would determine that. You know what, based on dates or?
One of the things I've written down to email you later is to ask if there's any chance that we could get copies of the Easton meeting minutes, and maybe like if we found 2 other charters that we particularly liked when they were discussing these issues, maybe that might provide some insight as to why they made a decision one way or the other.
I guess, I mean, that has to be part of the final report, so if you request a complete final report from DCED, I would assume the meeting minutes will be part of that as an exhibit to the, because all of our meeting minutes will have to be an exhibit to our final report. So these final reports could be.
And that'll be interesting too, to see if, because before Easton, I don't know, I think you go back a good while.
Yeah, I think Downtown was in between that, it's pretty simple, so I don't think that's a good outline. I think I've early 2000s.
If you're reading more of the handwritten stuff out of the 70s.
I mean, in reading some of these, to your point, a lot of it can be taken, I think, word for word from a particular charter, assuming they went through all their due diligence and all their legal checks. And with Larry here, we're going to have the same kind of check. That I think that, in general, like with elections, one of the choices I see to be there is whether or not you do everything at large or whether you do some combination of districts. Other than that, there isn't a whole lot in that particular section, I think, to be decided upon. So, within each of these, there's maybe the 1 or 2 sort of hot button issues, and the rest of it's sort of like, regular city elections shall be held in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's a pretty vanilla statement.
But I mean, he's right though, like Easton breaks theirs out into wards, I believe.
Yeah.
There are three.
I don't think it's a good idea for us,
No.
But that's the only topic of discussion
exactly.
within that
We can have that
whole
done
section.
in 10 minutes.
And that's why I think some of these, like elections, can be hit more than one at a time. Others, like some of the ones that hit pretty early on, like city council and mayors and city administrator, may take more than one. Potentially. And that's going to be a product of the tone we want to strike with how micromanagement style.
Maybe if we're like going hot and heavy at one, we need to slide in one like elections for a meeting to calm everything down.
So,
Please find something we can agree on to have a meeting for. Well, then maybe we don't need to assign the schedule. I think you're right. Some of these are going to take longer than others. But if we keep this and maybe use this just as our goal still, try and commit to getting through all these still, it's close as we can to the end of June, knowing that at least I'm pretty confident we have a little bit of leeway there.
I think there's some overarching issues that we need to resolve before we can even go through these, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3. And one is specifically where the powers are gonna lie in terms of city council and in the mayor and so forth, because until, we know we resolve that, we can't even start to write an Article 2 or even start to write an Article 3, because
I think two and three are going to be a lot of work.
I agree with Richard, though, that maybe we should have a discussion particularly about that issue as a framework, that when we get to those, we are somewhat in agreement or not in agreement.
Well, right, and because,
As to how
well,
that-
and we may not be in agreement, who really knows? But, I mean, and one reason I say that is because once that, I'm wondering whether we can at least get steered in a particular direction earlier on, so that would steer us toward, of course, we're looking at these as a framework, all the various ones here as a framework. That certainly keys in to use one as a framework versus another.
Do you think it would benefit us to hear from the public?
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna bring up. Another component of this is public opinion, and to some respect, my personal opinion is that a home rule charter, Altoona would benefit from a home rule charter, whatever the form of government ends up being. So, although I may have an opinion of what I'd want that form of government to be, I don't want that to be the thing that would kill the eventual adoption of the home rule charter. So, I think that there is a public opinion element there, a public appetite for, what the end result is, and I wouldn't want to put one contentious, provision in here that kills the whole thing, when the whole thing overall is a good positive step for the city.
Yeah, I think, not that, I think we've heard all that we can hear. I think that we've already been hearing from the public in different sectors, not specifically about the question this or that, but we've been hearing aspects of I think, what our city is right now, on the outskirts of that central question, which I guess, stated for the obvious, what is the role of the mayor?
Well, should we engage that first then? In other words, Wayne
I-
has listed these
Yeah.
according to articles that are pre-established, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That doesn't necessarily imply any importance.
Yeah, my sole purpose was to cover everything.
Okay.
Not.
So that
necessarily
provides
order.
structure to it, and then maybe we should prioritize.
I tend to think that is, I've heard other ideas about other big hot button issues, but I think that's the one. I think that's the biggest one by far.
Powers of the mayor.
The power of the mayor, right. And frankly, although I agree with you, Richard, that I wouldn't want to see that sink the home rule idea as a whole, it's still fundamental that we're going to have to go one way or the other. And
One way or the 12 others.
what's that?
One way or the 12 others.
Well, yeah. And there are different versions. You're right. There are, but we have to figure out what that role is going to be. And if that role ends up sinking the whole thing as a ballot referendum in the fall, then I guess that's what it does, and that's unfortunate.
I would disagree.
But then that would tell us that maybe we need to, and I hate to think this way, but that would tell us that, well, then let's try this again and go in a different route.
Well, why would we, like Richard said, why would we waste all of this time putting together a charter that's gonna get voted down? We're elected by the residents of the city of Altoona, shouldn't we hear from the residents first as to where they think their government is, or what ideas they might have about a change in potential government? I think that, I agree with Richard that we have a much greater chance of getting it passed in the end if we listen to our people.
Well, there's two parts to this. So there's the initial knee-jerk reaction that you're going to get at this point in time. Then there is the educated over time and all the articles that Bill's going to write for, write for us on educating on why we think that's a good idea. So I don't know that you'd necessarily abandon, what you think is the best form of government right from the beginning. You want to hear from, I think, the public. If we disagree as a group, then I think that it's the job to educate and try to inform as to no, when you get to the bottom of the list, this still needs to be that, and this is why. And
Yeah,
such
our
interventions.
role is to study this and make a recommendation based
Right.
upon an informed study, not just react. I mean, I'm not a big believer in finger in the air politics. So if we say, hey, this is how we feel based on all of our study, this is where this needs to go, it's our job to have the public hearings, say, here's the proposal, here's why, what's the reaction? And if the reaction is, 25 people showing up with pitchforks, I mean, you're gonna have that, but is it based on logic, or is it based on our reaction?
So if you look at our schedule, our timeline, at what point?
Well,
are
I
you
mean,
thinking?
we could start tonight. I think there's two fundamental questions. One leads to the second. Do you think the mayor should be part-time or full-time? And if full-time, do you think it should be a completely separate legislative branch from the executive branch? I mean, those are the two simplified levels that I see the question. The Easton sort of bridges the second one, where the mayor is also still part of the legislative branch. You could go further than Easton does and keep a similar division of powers to what we have now, where you have a city manager who's in charge of everything, and the city council, mayor of one person of that, only has control over that city's manager and no one else. Easton allows for the mayor to have control over the city manager and everybody else. Whereas Allentown is a completely separate executive branch. Mayor's not part of the legislative branch. He's not on council, and has like the president and the Congress, has to work together to get things done. So,
I guess I was referring to the public comment meeting. If we look at our schedule here, at what point are you thinking that?
well, I'm saying if we went into a straw poll on those two subjects here tonight, and you put it in the paper tomorrow, that would start that process.
But,
Well, that would be the teacher.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think like you're saying, that's not what we're looking for. We're
No,
looking for more
well, I think
educated
it's both.
comment.
I think there's going to be a handful, and maybe it's not even a handful, maybe there's two or three. Clearly, the role of the mayor is one. There may be one or two others. I think once we're in a position to identify those, and I think have a basic feel for what our recommendation would be, we schedule public hearings to say, here's where we're considering going, here's why, and this public hearing I think would be a little different than the other, where we would have presentations, here's our thought process, here's why we think this will work, here's what not to be afraid of, here are the concerns, and then get feedback on that. Like some of the feedback will be, no, we don't want to change nothing. That group's always going to be out there. And then there's going to be some folks who have legitimate questions about it, or what have you. And then it's our job, not necessarily, we have to weigh the value of that feedback. But I'm not saying I don't want to just say, what do we think is going to win? I think we've got to figure out what is going to be best for the city. And then it's our job to make certain we get the message out as to why it should win. Our role is to do the hard work, educate ourselves, and then explain ourselves, and get people to either agree with us or disagree with us, but not to just react to whatever strong opinion we might hear from what very well could be a vocal minority.
I agree, and I think it's our task to come up with a recommendation based on our skill to analyze and evaluate and stuff like that. And I think Richard makes an excellent point that we probably ought to prioritize, and we ought to begin with powers of the mayor, the city administrator, whatever we want to call that, since that's probably going to be a learning experience, and we can work through that rather than save it.
And I suspect that'll take the most time to do it right, to get through everything, because they do interact with, it touches on two or three of these.
And there's a lot of variation too, and there's no one best way apparently of doing it. So it's gonna be up to us.
I'm just scared of, I mean, for me personally, I don't feel educated enough to be making this decision yet. Richard, you seem to be very pro-mayor, full-time mayor. There might be others on this commission that are. It would be helpful to me to know why you hold that position. And that may not be something you can speak about today, but if we can come up with something as to why you feel one way or the other,
Well,
or
yeah,
those sorts of things.
I think we're gonna have to start really talking about this and not talking around the topic. And so, as you just said, yes, I believe that we should have a full-time mayor, no question about that. After that, there's some other really big issues about, well, you know, because Easton would have a full-time mayor, but they're still a member of council, whereas Allentown, as we discussed, has a full-time mayor and it's a separate branch altogether, kind of an executive branch. So there's still a difference there to talk about what is the role of full-time mayor. But I think we have to, I really think we've heard from people who testified that we need a full-time mayor, so I'm not saying that as a knee-jerk reaction of just what I think. I've listened to people who testified, and I've heard over and over again, there's no way we could have, you know, done this with our city, that we could have done these kind of developments or whatever without having a mayor who could devote his full attention, you know, to these things. Which also means that the idea of having a mayor who's also your city manager, so to speak, is also crazy, because you know, if they're that, they can't devote their full time to, I don't know.
What they should be doing.
Yeah, what they should be doing. Thank you. Yeah, instead of what they shouldn't be doing as an elected official.
You're
You're absolutely
delineating
right.
between leadership and management.
Yeah, right. So I think, and then one more thing is that the sooner we really start talking about this in concrete ways, I think the sooner we can really start working on getting additional feedback on what the voters and not, you know, the community, what the community believes, and you know, it's voters and business leaders and everything, you know, so it's not just one part of the city, it's all of the city.
I think it's pretty clear we have one topic that'll have an awful lot of time, that'll take several meetings. I guess part of my caution would be, I don't know that we worry about that, because Richard's right. A couple of these topics we flow
Yeah,
through.
when I was looking, you know, the last four specifically, I don't even know, you could even move powers of the city down in that group. I mean, I don't know if that's not something you necessarily need to do to start with. Yeah.
That's mostly.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's gonna be maybe mayor first, city council second, departments and agencies and financial management. Those are the four topics that are going to take the majority of the time and the majority of the detail, even within all these charters. And that's where I see the biggest variance between the charters, is in those four sections too. You know, the rest of the stuff is somewhat mundane. Somebody told them that had to be in there type stuff. You know, going through.
So do we start next time with whether it's 3 or 2 or a combination of 2 and 3?
You should.
I think so.
Is there any other subject that anyone sees as a big touchstone?
I think to the degree we do or don't want to tackle departments, could be. I mean, if we're going to sit here and say we think this tree of departments, which is different than the tree of departments that exist over there today, that would be controversial. To the degree we're not going to tackle it at all, would basically leave what they have in place, and then if future city councils want to combine departments, they could, or abolish departments, or add departments, they could. Not that would probably be less controversial, but give them more flexibility. But do we want to give them that much power? So that's kind of the question there.
I'll give what my thoughts are on that, and this is based on what I've heard from many of the department heads already, is that they were promoting home rule because they wanted flexibility in being able to maybe change around the department head structure, the tree structure, And I don't know if, and actually I think I do, I don't think that particular idea is a stagnant idea. I think that idea changes over time as times change
I
and
couldn't
technology
agree with you
change
more.
and all that.
Yep.
And so in light of that, I would very much think that that should be something that council would determine, and that maybe we're best leaving that up to them. Not, and then again, of course, there are several of these that give good examples of that where they don't lay that out.
So, but that doesn't sound like that, I mean, just hearing me out, I'm not sure that would be a big.
I think it'd only be big is if you decided to do the opposite.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So if we focus on leadership, whatever that is, and depending on how the leadership turns out, that will be a cascading of decisions that we either let it up to the leaders, we're gonna end up trusting, or we take it upon ourselves because we designed a leadership style that requires us to be very specific.
I think in retrospect, I mean, one thing that we've heard over and over again is that we want the flexibility of home rule.
Yeah.
And I think that if that's one of the big reasons we want home rule, is we want that flexibility, that we need to make sure that we have a flexible home rule and not fill it with a whole bunch of stuff.
I don't know which one it was that I read, but it was like 5 pages. And it just was intuitively appealing because it pretty much said, you know, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and it led it up to the people that would be elected leaders or
Right.
appointed leaders. And it didn't go into great detail, and I'm thinking, from my point of view, that would be my preferred outcome for our charter.
Yeah.
Considering we're at one point in time, we think we know what we're doing right now, it could be different 3 or 5 years down the line.
Can I
Yeah,
try and find that one and remind
I
us all?
think it's State College.
Oh.
Gosh.
Surprise, surprise.
I think the shortest of the ones that, at least that I printed out, which I think were all the ones that we were emailed, was Wilkes-Barre, which I think was 22 pages with huge margins.
Huge margin.
Yeah, huge margins. Yeah, no, I mean, seriously, because Allentown is only about that length, but it's small print and no margins. So,
State
but,
College is 10 pages.
yeah, I didn't print that.
5 pages double sided.
And they're the 9th biggest city now, correct?
I need to go get the state.
I don't know, but there's smart people down there, I know that.
They'll be the first to tell you.
They told me that.
More than one.
Yeah.
So I'm not hearing that there's a huge one out there other than the role of the mayor.
No, because it trickles down. I mean, once you establish the role of the mayor, the role of the city manager, presuming we would still have one, the interplay between those two becomes key, but until you decide the mayor, you can't decide the city manager's powers. I mean, the role of city council is sort of everything that you don't give to the mayor, in a great degree.
I think there's one other possible, but I think I know that we're all on the same, well, I don't know, actually, I don't know that we're all on the same track, right? I can't possibly say that. That whether we would have a city administrator or a city manager, I'm hoping that we do.
That's what I just alluded to. I think you need to choose the power of the mayor, then you need to carve out what the division of power is between that mayor and that city manager as a secondary.
Now, as long as we're on, you mentioned the word choose. Larry said that's up to us. How,
Choose what?
like, how will we decide things like that?
So 7 of us
The vote,
can't have
are
a
we
tie.
voting?
Can't have a tie.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we could do it, as I understood that, you can do it to the point where we have a debate, somebody makes a proposal, do we have consensus on this? I don't know necessarily that we need to vote on each section, but we build consensus, okay, we have, as we get consensus on each section, and at the end, we would have one overriding vote to propose that as that document is the charter that we've built consensus on.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think I explained it to you is I felt that, within these 9 articles, as Wayne's laid them out, you may like, 7 of them, that you voted for, and they may be different than somebody else's 7, but you get to the bottom and say, okay, do I like the whole thing as it's been put together? Even though I'd lost my argument on Article 4, do I like the whole thing as a whole, or do I not like the whole thing as a whole? And that's where the final vote on the final charter comes in.
Are we gonna vote on each of the articles?
Well, I'm saying we don't necessarily.
I'm
need
not
to.
saying,
I mean,
I'm saying.
build consensus,
we
but-
determine whether we have sufficient consensus that
to move on to the next.
in a horribly bifurcated group, we might have 4 3s on everything, but if we're heading down that road, my guess is we're gonna have a product that's gonna be hard to.
Sell to the people.
Actually, along those lines, I guess I was about to ask a kind of a point of order almost, is that if we run into that dilemma and we have a 3-3 and someone's not
I'm
here
not sure,
and an
yeah.
abstention, what would be our policy on that?
My guess is we just have to put that off until the final vote, and then somebody, Bev would say, I'm proposing this be the final charter, and it would have her version in, and she would get the votes for that, and Richard would have his, with his. Ultimately, I think the smart move here is to have one formal vote at the end, try and build consensus as we move throughout.
And I did read some, we'll see how the half a year goes, but I did read some where there were some people on some of the home rule commissions that did vote against the home rule charter, and then they have the ability in the final report to sort of write the dissenting final report, that's like the Supreme Court does.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is, and they were sort of saying why the people should not approve it, and then there was a group of people that, now, in this case, all of these eventually got approved, so, regardless of those dissenters, these got approved, but there's, I don't know what the percentage was, the percentage is in there, the amount that did approve versus disapprove over time. Just, the only other thing that I haven't heard us talk about or really flesh out is, okay, we come next meeting and whichever topic we decide is going to be next, I may have some highlighted provisions. I think, okay, this is a good basis. Is it our intent then to take those, have them put in Microsoft Word into a article and have available for review at or before the next meeting?
Yeah, probably
And
the
who-
next meeting,
okay.
the first little block would be Larry. I know who it's not gonna be. But I would think that's the purpose of Larry or Linda.
You guys got all this extra time, right? Well, I mean, he didn't have any staff at his firm, so he would be able
Yeah, I mean,
to take from his notes and,
this is gonna be click, drag,
yeah.
paste, change.
Yeah, I don't see, in my personal opinion, I don't see the necessity to necessarily draft a sentence from scratch ourselves from reading these. I mean, I think it's going to be mix and match to some degree.
But that also gets back to my concept of the homework concept, come prepared to say if you're
I really
strong
like
in
this
there,
sentence from this.
here's what I would think would work for us. If you're participating, it'll probably be a lot on
Yeah,
how
and then
much you're working between the meetings.
Well, and then I think that's a good, I think that works really well for, I think this goes back to Richard's point though, I think that really works really well for the sort of major issues, but I think that until we establish as a consensus what we think that tree should look like, even prior to having the, any kind of public hearing, some of that is pretty tough to do because they're so broad.
But we're gonna take 2 or 3 meetings on that.
Okay.
We're not gonna come out.
I mean, if I
next
come
meeting.
with my vision of what I think the mayor and the council should be and all the provisions, spend all that time to find all the provisions, cut and paste from all these different ones of what I like that structure to be, come to this meeting, and then the whole group goes a different direction, that's quite a waste of time. If we decide on what that general, decide on the couple major decisions, that gives a framework for which now you can match to some of these other charters. Like, for instance, I have, the full-time or part-time is first decision. whether it's a complete separate executive branch, whether he's part of council like Easton, but yet oversees the executive branch, or whether it's like we have now, where it's just a full-time version of exactly what we have now, where there's a city manager over here that runs the city, and we have a mayor over here who's just part of city council, but yet now he's full-time. I mean, those are the three breakdowns I see of that decision. Then within the city manager's powers, you know, if there is an executive branch, is that city manager serve at his, you know, as an assistant, basically, at his complete, you know, does the city manager have any autonomous powers other than just having the direction to serve at the leisure of the mayor?
But the point I was trying, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, there's no way we're gonna get through all this on this huge a topic at our next meeting. I think we might get 2 or 3 answers moving in general.
I think
But
we can get
ultimately,
everyone.
the content is probably gonna be 3 meetings down the road, where we.
I think on those 3 or 4 things I just mentioned, everyone probably has some sort of opinion.
Well, I think so
I
too.
agree, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying, the final language.
No, but I think that if you knew everyone's somewhat opinion, if there happened to be consensus on that, that would give you a definite direction to get started.
I don't think it's gonna take 3 meetings. I think people sitting around the table right now
Have an
a pretty good
idea.
I think so too, and I think that the sooner we get that out.
Yeah, engage the
and we
issue.
engage the issue,
Yes,
the sooner we can get
I'm
feedback
pretty sure I
from
know,
voters
I'm
as
not
well.
100% sure in a couple areas where I am.
With the mayor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very vocal that I am supporting a full-time mayor. I just am still up in the air on a couple issues regarding, you know, whether it should be a separate executive or,
Okay.
I'm not
I
trying
know-
to I'm not saying you take a straw poll like, okay, I want this, and that. But I'm saying if we know the debates between 2 of those, have the debate between the 2 of those.
Well, maybe,
Why don't we take, each of us write it down on a piece of paper, gather it up, and take
Yeah,
a
maybe
simple.
it's not an issue.
yeah, right. And the other thing is maybe this is a way around writing it down on a sheet of paper and like I said, a straw poll almost, is we can talk about the pros and cons of, I mean, we have Easton sitting in front of us, I guess we can talk about the pros and cons of the Easton right now, as we see it. You know, I mean, and clearly this is what the letter is supposed to be. I'll just look at the appointment of, what is it, of the city administrator, I believe is what it is. That the city administrator is appointed by the mayor, but under advice and consent of the city council, right? Majority of the city council. And then city councils, if I remember right, can also remove the mayor, remove the city administrator, right?
I think it says actually on recommendation of the mayor.
Yeah.
Oh, on recommendation of the mayor, okay. All right.
Which other charters have much more formal ways of circumventing the mayor
Right.
than that.
Yeah, I mean.
But that gets to the nuance.
Yeah, right, and fundamentally, the nuances there are, if you have a mayor who's not in lockstep, I mean, if your mayor is in lockstep with the city council, none of this stuff is an issue. None of it.
That's the politics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, I mean, the problem is what happens
The
when.
mayor needs to be
Yeah.
in lockstep with 3 members of city council.
Okay, very well said.
Depends on, well, in this case.
Well, assuming it's
We just need to count the 4, right?
That's my favorite phrase. I mean, you're
So,
about to find, you know,
so-
how
so-
smart you are. if you figure
Yeah,
out
so the question is, you know, what happens when that's not the case? And how does that tie up the way that the city is supposed to function? You know, because I'm gonna think that can really happen a lot, where you're not in lockstep with at least 3 other city council members. And I'm not sure entirely how well it works to actually be in lockstep with 3 other council members, because as you said, you don't want to put your finger up into the wind all the time, and then that would force the mayor to always have his finger up into the wind with the city
But
council.
isn't that always the case? I mean, I don't know if lockstep's fair. It's not like, I keep coming back to counting to 4, and I always joke about it.
Mhm.
But I know when I served, I recognized that I always needed to get to 4, but they weren't ever the same 4 all the time. And actually, most times you got 7. But it was a matter of how your leadership style is can I find a way to bring everyone on board? And if I can't, then I gotta find a way to get to 4. But That's the case in any form of government, whether it's, you gotta get to a majority somewhere. If you're down in Harrisburg, you gotta get to 102, 26, and 1.
I think historically in these last few terms, we've seen that it's been nearly unanimous just about every time. You don't see a lot of controversial votes, I don't think.
I can think of a few 4-3s, but 5-2s.
I think the best you can do is to put together, you know, the charter as best that we believe, and when you have years where everybody's not gonna be in sync, or whatever you wanna call it, those are gonna happen no matter what we write.
Right.
I mean, that's inevitably, it is gonna happen, so, I mean, I don't think you can stop that, and I don't think you can worry about how we write that based on what if something doesn't fall in. I mean, you just have to do the best you can.
I mean, I always love that argument, say, well, what if the voters elect somebody crazy to be mayor?
Yeah, like to be hippo or something.
It's happened before.
It's happened.
Yeah, Chief's right. It's happened before. But it happened in, it can happen in any form of government. You can't worry about that. You gotta have faith that the people are ultimately gonna elect the right person. Did they elect the right people to this job?
Well, and I think that to the degree that the job,
I don't know, but you gotta have some faith that ultimately they'll get it right, or they'll have to pay better attention once they get it wrong.
yeah, and I think to the degree that the job potentially has more power than is ceremonial, people will pay attention more, and they'll be more interested in parties in pursuing it
And I
as
think,
well.
yeah, the quality of people, I think, will have.
I mean, that's what you have to.
Yeah, and that's actually,
Trust in the system.
and that's something that I come back to a lot is you want a really a quality mayor. And so you need to make sure that you have a job that's gonna attract someone who could be a real quality mayor, as opposed to having something out there. I think our job right now is
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna look to see who's in the audience. Right, make anybody upset. I think we have a job description right now for a mayor, which is a really great job of not attracting top quality of people. And we need to make sure we don't do that.
We have an opportunity to make that better.
That's right. But at the same time, we need to make sure it really does attract. And I'm not sure, I don't know what it, because we don't know what it takes to attract a top quality person, right? Who's full-time, because we want a top quality person who is going to devote full-time to this, not someone who says they're devoting full-time and
You
they're
can't
really,
predict
and
that
they're really.
in any position.
No, I know.
I mean, you give it a better chance. I'm not saying I disagree with you, but, who makes more than, pick anybody. Look at the judges, look at, I'm not criticizing anybody, but I'm just saying, it's not necessarily related. There are plenty of guys down in Harrisburg that I wouldn't want, doing a whole lot for me if I were hiring them personally. There are guys in Washington that way. I mean, any position, you're gonna have the, good and bad, better levels of quality than others, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't at least have some incentive there to get the right people in place. Right now, I would agree, the current position, there's tremendous disincentive on that. The way it's currently done, it very much limits the kind of person that's going to take the job.
It can be argued even more so than being on city council.
Oh, I would agree with that, because you get the heat and down, there's a perception that you have more power than you have. Where are we? I thought I was saying, mayor next time. Let's see where we go from there. I think the title says, and the way it makes sense, somebody mentioned it earlier, what you're really deciding is what you're giving to the mayor and what you're giving to the city administrator.
So that will be what we're looking at next time.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it goes 3, 2, 4. Reorganize these. So this would be first, would be number 3. And I guess, well, you could, I don't know,
No, I agree with that.
city council second,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
the other
just do all the
departments
elected.
third. And then might also do the financial manager fourth. Then you can jump up to
even gonna be Article 3?
Article 3, mayor and city administrator.
Article 1 and the preamble.
My question is, do you want anything, as far as, do you want me to bring my computer? Do you want anything on the screen, which is over here, there's PowerPoint?
Anything we have that
There's
allows us to tap into the internet would be great, I think, in case we wanna bring up somebody's charter or.
Yeah, because I guess one of the things here would be is if I have a bunch of these sections from various ones that we've received highlighted up, if everyone doesn't have the same thing in front of them, but how much fumbling around is there gonna be, or should we let you know ahead of time,
You would need to email me whatever you have.
ahead of time, before that?
Mm-hmm.
I think,
Well, I think that's a good message, as much as we can get the Linda ahead of time, as opposed to walking in here like I did. The letter ready to start that till like 4 o'clock today.
Are you bragging or complaining?
Dan, I am so overwhelmed right now, I can't wait for
I
January.
mean, you came up with a nice outline and, you
Crazy
know,
quiet.
got us started.
Well, but I think it's a good point. Try and get, if you have some thoughts, get them to Linda so it's easy to disperse them, share them at the next meeting. And what do we have the ability, I'm seeing whiteboards, do we have, I'm
Yeah,
seeing a
there's
projector?
a projector, I can use the wireless and get on, there's the code, I can get on. That's it. It's just for this room, that's it.
All right, is there any,
And I don't have.
Well, I mean, I don't know, no, I- I mean, my only question is there any reason not to discuss a little bit of this now so that we can be prepared on which direction we're going next time? Is there a reason to wait for next time if we have anything next? And if you have.
if people wanna start, I don't know why we don't start. I'm not ready to start, but others wanna speak up. I mean, I've said basically where I stand, but there's still some things I need to.
I agree with that too. I'm not saying, but I mean, I think as far as if there's a general notion that we're on the same track or different tracks will help as far as being prepared in which direction.
Well, if you're asking for position statements, I am not in favor of strong mayor. I would be in favor of strong salary for a qualified individual to fill that position.
For a full-time or part-time?
Full-time. Full-time, well-paid individual.
To
I
serve.
have no problem with that.
But what do you say
Serve
the
as
job
similar-
description is?
Similar capacity
That's
to
why
what we have
I
now.
hate this phrase strong mayor, because it's
And
just.
the terminology should be, we should decide what we're talking about before,
Right.
maybe before we start talking about it. But I have said before, and I will say it again, I am not in favor of having individuals in positions of power and authority who are not prepared for the task. And I mean prepared by experience, education, training, and whatever else it might be. And I can see anybody running for mayor, and especially if there's a big salary.
So I gave 3 examples. We can go around to the degree that people want to share this. Full-time, part-time, you said full-time.
Uh-huh.
Then I said either a complete separate executive branch, which would be a very powerful mayor, a potentially powerful mayor who's part of council as well, is the middle ground, sort of, and then a separate, separate division between city manager and a mayor who would preside as the, mayor of council, president of council, like we have now. That's the one that you're saying that you'd be in favor.
That's where I'm
Similar
starting.
power structure to what we have now,
Yeah.
but that position would become full-time.
Yes, and well paid.
What would you be getting paid to do?
Exactly, that's why.
Well, that would be another definition. I have no problem, because a lot of what the mayor does, a lot of what those guys, we're all guys, right?
Yeah.
That we heard from, are out there politicking, schmoozing, shaking hands. They're politicians. And that's what they're doing. They're not necessarily back there running the city as far as I can tell.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'll go-
But I think that's also,
Well, I'll go next.
uh,
I would be in favor of a full-time mayor as well, and either, and this is where I think the debate needs to be, either a leader from the executive branch or what Dave is saying, where it would be a full-time mayor who would have the ability to full-time be head of city council and be the person who can go out and promote the city, go out and meet with companies and other politicians and the people in Harrisburg to try to sell our city and bring development to the city. But he would still just be one more member of city council, and you'd still have that city manager here running the day-to-day operations of the city.
And he would
But
have
I'm
everyone-
okay at this point with the debate on that or the executive branch. I'm a little scared of Easton's model because I think it gives him too much power, because I see Easton's as being a complete executive branch plus a vote on council, and I think that's a little bit too much power for a mayor to have.
In that scenario, does the mayor have anybody reporting to him, like is the city manager, does he have the ability to hire and fire a city manager, or is that
In
still council?
Dave's example, in the separate, where he's part of council
Right.
still? No, I mean, he is one vote of 7 to fire that city manager.
The
There's
analogy
a
is the
complete
chairman of the board.
division,
The
yeah.
chairman of the board, okay?
Chairman of that council,
Chairman
that's
of
it.
that council. A
We have a city
well-paid,
manager running.
well-paid leader out there leading the city, getting money, talking to business people. I have no problem with any of that.
Would you have any trepidations putting on a stronger mayor if you set parameters up for him? If you set the if we decided what the
can't have
pre-qualifications.
Well,
Qualifications for
we had
elected
that
positions.
discussion,
No,
other
I'm
than
not
living here.
against pre-qualifications, but sort of like
Exactly.
limitations on specific powers.
Exactly.
I don't think so, not right now.
Well, Dave, one of the things that I keep struggling with, did I just interrupt? Did I
No,
cut
I'm
you?
done.
I'm gonna flare you ahead, I don't want to interrupt you.
All right, great. Yeah, I was about to say what I think. I think we need to obviously have a full-time mayor. I think we need someone particularly who can go out and as Richard said, to sell our city. I think one of the most critical things about being able to sell our city and what we're looking for in a full-time mayor, to make sure we're not paying someone to not be able to do anything, is we also need to make sure we give them the ability to carry through with whatever deals they're going to make and trying to sell our city. And if we don't give them the ability to follow through, now I realize that there's going to be some checks and balances there, but I don't want to, and make sure council's going to do this. I almost feel more like, council would need to veto it in order to stop it. I don't think they'll have, I don't know, I'm not quite all the way flushed through there, but anyway, I want to make sure they have the ability to follow through on all that, because if they don't have the ability to follow through, I see two problems. One, we're paying for a way overpriced figurehead, and two, because they don't have the ability to follow through, I don't think we attract top quality, because top quality, I don't see a top quality person running for a position where it's going to take a large amount of their time, and yet they're going to be hamstrung once they're there. I mean, because the reality is, even if we pay, a hefty sum, this is still a public position. It's still going to be nothing compared to what this particular person could make in the private sector, right? I mean, right?
Yeah,
I'm hoping.
yeah.
I'm hoping. So, and so this, whoever this is who takes this job, is taking a huge cut in what they would normally be able to get as a salary in the private sector. And so why are they doing this? They're doing it for the public good, great. But I'm going to acknowledge that they're a politician. They're also doing this because it's likely that they have other ambitions as well. And
Part of what some of
and
them
I need to give them to have the ability to have that out, so to speak.
Part of what some of them did was a lot of grant writing, a lot of looking for opportunities to seek out funding and things like that. And one individual person without any authority isn't going to be able to do something like that. I mean, you need to have somebody that can do that. I mean, that mayor can't do anything if he's the one sole voice trying to get out there. Now, he can do the handshaking and he can, do the visiting and all that. But ultimately, like you said, he needs some kind of power or authority to be able to speak on behalf of the city to make decisions. I mean,
It's like a coach that has personnel discretion too.
What do you mean,
I don't know what
Richard?
that should look
What
like.
does the term follow through mean?
I'm not really sure. I'm not sure entirely what you do. It'd be a good we asked some of the people who were here, and they weren't entirely all that forthcoming and saying exactly what they did to sell their city to bring in new investment.
Well,
But-
may I
but-
offer
but may-
what
but
the
maybe-
impression is that I
Yeah,
got
yeah,
from
go
your
ahead.
term?
Mhm.
Command control. In other words, almost dictatorial ability to implement. One individual had the ability to implement what he or she thought was best for the city.
And I
Well,
would
with-
agree with you to the degree that right now, that ability is still given to a city manager who you have really no control over, even necessarily politically.
City manager has unilateral
They have
decision making.
over the whole workings of the city. It's unilateral.
Where does council come in?
All they can do is fire him. And so is you as the voter, we've had a city manager for a number of years. The only way to ever have gotten, if that person had been reelected each of 4 years, at least you could have potentially had your say every 4 years. The only way that you can get rid of a city manager now is to get 4 votes on council to get rid of them. Otherwise, it's an indefinite rule. At least here, you get the chance every 4 years to re-look at your decision on whether or not you think that mayor's doing a good job. But if you have a city council who's not willing to stand up to a city manager, then their only recourse is to fire them. So, how often do you have a disagreement with a colleague where you'd rather them do something else, but if your only recourse is to fire them each time, you're not going to fire them each time. Sometimes you got to push up with the disagreement.
That's a really good example. Yeah, and what I foresee is, in terms of checks and balances, because I don't want the all-powerful mayor who just runs everything, is something like a 5-2 vote on council to either say something happens, the mayor appoints the city manager, who's basically doing his bidding, so to speak, in terms of the way the management is working, and if that gets to where it's out of hand, if something's happening that's not right, then council can get rid of that person with a 5-2 vote. Something more than just a simple majority, but, I think 5-2 is a reasonable, what's that?
60%.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good majority. In which case, hey, they're out of there, and now, mayor, well, you got to find someone else to fill the slot now,
Now, along those lines, though, this is for the future conversation. As you try to get in to start to micromanage that executive, if we choose to go that direction with an executive branch and a mayor who has control, once you start to get into try to micromanage that control is where you get into the potential house of cards. And trying to sit here now today and come up with a structure that's going to work when they implement it, you can get a little bit overstepping our bounds and trying to create those checks and balances.
I think there's another thing that in terms of the power of the mayor, I can't imagine having a situation where the mayor cannot single-handedly put forth a proposal for a vote at city council. I don't think they should have a vote. I think that if we're giving authority to a mayor, that's a lot of other authority. I think they shouldn't be a vote on council, but they should at least be able to get it into the discussion where it's going to really get discussed.
You're sort of proposing an executive branch.
All right, so I'm in the executive.
Yes, I am, yes.
Would you also envision the mayor having the power to replace all department heads as well?
Department, no, I think department heads are, and I hate to use the word bureaucratic, but that is technically the word. They're supposed to be external politics. I think department heads should be immune to the politics
But it would be
of
hired
mayors
as
coming
city
in.
manager, correct?
Right, and so the way, and so I realize that, that.
Well, there's two levels, well, not to cut
Okay,
you off
yeah,
here, but along those lines, there's two different versions of what we heard. One was the Allentown model, which was no government tree exists. The mayor gets elected and he designs his own tree every 4 years or every how often he gets that. There's no oversight or anything given to city council to say you must have a fire department, a police department. It was the mayor got to come in and arrange it however he wanted from top down and organize it as he sees fit. The other way of doing that is where city council says, no, these are the departments and you and your city manager fill those departments, which we have set forth as being the structure of the city.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of where you got, if you go that direction, you got to decide where you want the power to organize the government to be, and whether it's.
I think the only backdoor way that I see for this to happen, you know, which I would not like personally be approving of, is if a mayor were to appoint a city manager, administrator, who then, based on merit reviews on whatever times they have, they basically set up a department head to be ousted based on merit. You know,
I mean, my
you know
opinion,
what I'm
again,
saying? And I'm hoping that can't happen in whatever we.
I think you have to give the mayor, if you're going to go that direction, I think you have to give the mayor the ability to, if the city manager is going to be appointed by the mayor, and the mayor then has the ability to fire that city manager, you have to let the mayor have the ultimate say over the department heads as well, because he'll just, if he doesn't happy with them, the same situation, but without the 4-3 vote, he can fire the city manager, who, you know, if my only choice, because I can't get rid of that department head, is to get rid of you, you're putting them into a box that doesn't need to necessarily be created.
But isn't that just another level of the discussion we're having a few
Yeah.
minutes ago of saying, at what point are you going to, you know, if there's 5 department heads and you agree with strongly that 4 of them were done really well, but are you gonna really fire the guy or the girl over the fact that they made a public works director or somebody you didn't want?
I'm assuming, if you're appointing the city manager, that you're hoping to have a good working relationship with your colleague who's going to be basically your assistant.
I'd like to know how many times these positions change. In other words,
Well, that's one of the things. I mean, almost all of these say the appointment of the city manager, or whatever they call it, is perpetual. But I would be curious to see the statistics on when a new mayor is hired, how many of them survive through that transition.
no, what I'm saying, at Easton, for instance, there's not a long track record here, but have they had turnover in department heads?
And turnover in
Well, you
minutes as well.
In Easton's case, I think you'd have to look at whether the city manager is turned over.
Right.
But that's selected at the whole city council. I think you have to look at the ones where just the mayor appoints the city manager and see what turnover, if any, there is when a new administration comes in. Do they clean house, so to say, and bring in a new set of.
Why would
City
you want
manager,
to
department heads.
posit power in one individual, man or woman, that he or she could unilaterally get rid of the city manager without some sort of consensus on the part of council? I don't get it.
You wouldn't, I mean, I think you'd have to have
Well,
consensus.
I heard
You
people
are.
talking about.
There's both versions in here.
Yeah.
Because the reason for that is the person runs on a platform and they run with the proposed administration and the way they're gonna do it.
And
And
you
you're
could
not.
have-
and
You could
they're
have some
getting-
individual that, wants to take the flag down from Gospel Hill, who gets some sort of weird idea, run for mayor. And if they had that power and the city manager didn't want to take the flag down, but eliminate the flagpole or something, he'd fire him. Unilateral, just fire him. Now, that might be an extreme example, but if the mayor has that power, then that's like dictatorship. That ain't a form of government in my mind.
That's the form of government that most cities around the country have.
Well, too bad for them.
I think that, what was I gonna say, if you're gonna elect a mayor on a platform with the ability, he has a platform of what he wants to, a direction he wants to take the city, initiatives, whatever that is, that's put into action by the city manager. The mayor, because that's actually specifically kind of not what we really want the mayor to do. We want the mayor to have that overall guiding principle or whatever, but whatever the action is that's going to put it into place is going to be done by the city administrator. So I think that's why we have that city administrator. So I don't think it seems unusual to have a city administrator who would be appointed by the mayor, and it would seem, it seems logical to me that the city administrator
It doesn't seem
does
logical
change
to
every
me.
time. that
Well,
the mayor
and here's
changes.
why I walked the line
But
and
it's also,
said both.
okay, but it's also the fact that, whereas we can't put in requirements of the background of the mayor, we can put in requirements of the background of the city manager.
Yeah.
Correct.
You know, and we should, and they should be quite
Yeah.
hefty. So to make sure that at least there we have someone who is a professional
Who the
manager.
mayor could be a complete idiot and fire him anyhow.
Or just be running.
Well, it would still, and if that happens, then the next one would still have to be a professional manager. I
But
mean, we would
in all
still have a
cases,
professional
Yeah.
manager.
in all cases that I read, the city manager had to be ratified by city council.
Yes.
But it wasn't required to be fired. They could be fired by the by the mayor. But that's why I sort of took both roads. I sort of either agreed with you, I either agree we need to go full-time and keep what we have now and hope that that's an improvement and can lead in some way to promoting our city better and developing our city from within the current structure, or I'm sort of going the whole way towards the executive branch, where if you're going to give the guy the freedom, I don't think that we can sit here and say how we would micromanage that job with these checks and balances from this position. So I'm sort of up for debate on both ends, where it's either the executive branch with executive power who can run that administration the way he was elected to do so, or somewhat stick with what you got and hope you can make a small improvement. But try to walk that line where, okay, he can't do department heads, but he can do, I think
That's well said. I have no problem with paying a politician to be a politician. If the mayor's going to be the mayor, head of council, whatever that, pay him to do, and then identify what he's supposed to do. But I am a big fan and proponent of body of knowledge and expertise in a field which is a dedicated, academic, and experiential field that people go into. They know what they're doing, and they, for the most part, do a nice job.
Dave, that's Paulina. We don't elect presidents of the United States.
I don't
They're
care about that.
bureaucrats.
We're not talking about
You're
that.
talking about bureaucrats, though. Bureaucrats don't
Yeah.
We
lead.
can't.
Yeah,
Bureaucrats don't lead, though. They bureaucrat.
they run the city. They run the city.
No, they manage. They manage what the politicians put in place
Okay,
for
the
them to manage.
politicians being the council, I mean, the city
And that's the form that you
manager.
have now.
Yeah, I think we have to, I don't know how we got to where we were with the
But-
previous city manager, okay? And I don't know whether he had council intimidated or not. And I think I already asked this, there were no performance evaluations done, or were there?
I know early on we did.
Well, I see that's incomprehensible as well.
Right.
If the person gets paid, they should be evaluated on what they do and.
I think, let me go and I'll stick my neck out on this, is I think I heard over and over again, I count at least probably 4 or 5 times, where we were basically told something is within council's authority. Okay, they could easily pass it or not pass it, and in all cases, they just took no action. They just
Saying
failed.
under what we have now.
Under
that's
what we have now,
I
they
remember.
just wouldn't take the action, that, you know, and yet, yeah, it would be political suicide, and yet, in fact, in several cases, it was the council members telling us this. You know, it's like, well, you're the one who could do this, why didn't you do it? You know, and so I think this actually reflects back to this whole idea of having someone have the ability to do something, you know, and give them the ability so that they can run with it. And if the ability lies in council, where it has to be a group decision, then I think everyone's always running for cover. Whereas if it's a single person who can lead the way, when you're leading the way, yes, it can be dangerous. You know, you can get shot down and political suicide and all that. But yet, there's also the reward. There's also the reward. And so if you do it right, there's a reward for that. And so you're willing to, so I think a single person is willing to take the chances and is willing to make things happen, whereas a group of people is always held back.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, my sort of example I gave was the city manager is very safe, and I think the city manager, in my opinion, sort of leads to a very slow but very steady sort of decline. That there's no reason for a city manager to go out there and stick his neck out, to go down in politics and to go down and bring the big sort of politically dicey project to the city. So what you're going to get is a very steady course, but I think very steady decline, which is you know, sort of the state of where I've seen Altoona go over my short time watching it, is that it's, there's no ups and downs, everything's sort of smooth, department heads don't change very often, everything's very stable, but there's nothing to really spike it back up. So then bring in strong mayor, executive mayor, whatever you want to call it, full-time mayor. Now you have, to the whim of that person, and the quality of that person can have a very sharp spike upwards or downwards. That you are definitely, you can move the needle very quickly in one direction or the other.
So minimal risk, whereas risk.
Risk, but very great reward.
It's risk benefit. You
Compensation
have
is
risk benefit or you don't.
It's not risk.
I think there's been some proven
Analysis.
track records too.
I think the one
mean,
goes this way, the one has potential to go this way, or that way.
Yeah, based on what?
Well, I would throw something else in there, is that if you there is the risk benefit, and risk comes with benefit, or let me put it benefit risk, because I like to think optimist. Okay, so it's a benefit risk, and the flip side of that is that it's no benefit and no risk, but that also means stagnation, and stagnation is not how you're gonna push your city above all the other cities that are willing to take the risk.
So I think part of what we have to think about, that I'm thinking about right now, is we have just been through what apparently was stagnation and a bureaucratic form of government given a strong city manager. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, now, if that's what we're reacting to, I fully understand that. But we got a strong city manager in reaction to the opposite that occurred previous to that. A strong mayor.
And potentially one of those perceived downward spikes.
Correct. So, I mean, I'm not sure what all that means, but I'm a big fan of leadership. But I don't know of many leaders of many companies other than entrepreneurs that own the company that get to just come in and fire people and do what they want because they're the leader.
They do football teams all the time.
Yeah, well, this ain't a football team.
But most of the time when you get a
Other
new
than the
CEO or a new president or whatever, typically they are gonna
It's-
bring in the
pardon
people
me.
that
Yes,
they
it is
want.
not every other city. It's the large
Washington
cities.
does it every 4 to 8 years.
It's the large cities.
Washington does it every 4 to 8 years.
We're not a large city. We need to understand who we are.
And I
what
think
we have
that
to work with.
I think that if you got elected mayor, you would have to look at that. You're not necessarily going to come in. I mean, some people may run on an agenda that we'll pick on the police chief since she's here. I'm going to fire the police chief. Some people may run. Somebody didn't have a vendetta against every department head and came in and just completely changed everybody. You might have your one pet peeve.
Well, am I
but-
wrong? But did I not hear the city directors, the managers, say almost uniformly that they were in favor of the city manager?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Does that
But
mean anything?
I think, but there was also, didn't I hear
I don't
that
think
they
it
were
was
saying
saying the
that?
city
They're
manager's
still
not
gonna
going to be
report
there.
to the city manager.
They
We're
were
not
saying
taking
that
away the
because didn't we used to have a
structure.
system where the city
Yeah,
council
there was-
members took turns?
Yes, they were the
over-
department.
So, and then I think they were saying, don't give us that. Don't give
Oh,
us
is that
that.
what you think they were saying?
Yes.
Okay.
I also think, I do tend to agree with you, that when Tim Heilman was in here, he said, please keep the politics out of it, which I think a strong mayor that eliminates that possibility. It will be nothing but political.
I think there's a little of each. I think there's no question, if I were a city department head, I would not want to go back to the old days where whoever gets elected and then when we divvy up the power,
Yeah.
the dumbest guy in the room is going to be head of public works or whatever, however.
But a lot of
But I'm not disparaging anybody who used to serve there. But I mean, the mayor had the chief. And,
He got you,
sorry. I didn't mean that. You know what I mean? It's,
the way that I heard a lot of those.
you don't want that, but you also want, frankly, I think department heads are going to want the security of knowing, hey, the city manager's always going to be there. It's one less thing.
Sure.
Quality candidates in those positions.
I mean, I sort of took it the other way when I was hearing them say about the stability that they liked. It's also the complacency that they like. That there's no one coming in to shake up the tree. That sometimes you need somebody to come in and change the way things are done. And that's not necessarily, I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, I also can remember them all saying that they've done the best that they can to cut the budgets and keep them right where they need to be. And so if you're suggesting that we need to mess with that situation, then are they not presenting the whole story?
I think they're presenting a very safe bureaucratic story.
I think they're
So
presenting
can we
any of the
consistent?
testimony that we've heard here to be, I look
Take it
at,
with a grain of
If-
salt.
I look at
if-
what you say about the 3 gentlemen that came in that were strong mayors. I can't base my decision solely on their opinion because they're strong mayors. I can't base, you're right, we have to do our homework, there is no doubt about it, and these next 2 weeks, I will be reading as much as I can. Because I don't think we can take the testimony here and make an educated decision just based on what we've heard here. I don't, at this point, I would say that I'm kind of, I'm torn between full-time and part-time, but I would definitely say that I'm more in favor of the way that Dave is leaning, that if what we're saying is we need somebody, we can attract somebody, then we pay them a little bit more, and maybe that means full-time, but I would agree that I'm not in favor of a strong executive.
I think one thing you said about, about the cuts and department heads cutting as much as they can, and that's just as far as they can go. I think that if you're going to hold the belief that we can cut, that there is things to cut in the budget, because I think what I also heard from there is that, you get down to a point you just can't cut the budget anymore, and I am a believer that there is a point that exists like that. But nevertheless, if you're going to be a mayor and you're going to say, no, we can do cuts, once you've reached that point with the department head, I think that actually forces the issue of, well, if you're going to go further, then you clearly need a new department head who has a different vision of how the department can actually run in order to get to that point, if such cuts are even possible.
If I might interrupt, how would a mayor know that it's possible to cut any deeper in any given department?
I would agree with you.
It's a matter, but it's policy. I mean, not that I would espouse, but you could have somebody take the position that we can eliminate our police force and turn the whole city over to the state police, just like some of the townships do.
Yeah.
And so,
But what if the mayor did that?
then they would have to you'd still have to get it approved budgetarily. It depends. I'm not advocating for strong mayor. Remember that. I'm still struggling through on some of these issues, which is why I'm not speaking up. But currently, that could happen anyway. You can take that position right now.
That's where I kind of believe that we should have some checks and balances on the mayor, so that the mayor can't specifically do something like what you said and say, get rid of the police department and rely on.
But the city manager could come up with that concept right now.
Yeah, and that's my point.
Well,
It's-
actually, seven
most-
did it because nobody else was going to.
Most of what we're saying, the city manager has the power to do right now, and you have no checks and balances over them, other than city council firing them.
Yeah, see, and I'm getting real confused,
And
or
don't
not
forget we-
confused, but I feel badly that the city manager, the previous city manager, whom I know very well, essentially got us into a situation where we're now looking at entropy through bureaucracy. And inevitable
But you're faced with
decline.
potentially getting a new city manager, regardless of
Yeah,
what
yeah,
happens in this
And,
room.
and that's why.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really know the exact history. We went through a couple city managers before we got the stability
Yeah,
that we've
and
had.
I'm going to stick up for that city manager because I worked with him closely for 12 years. I don't think he did that, and I never felt intimidated by him one little bit when I was in office. But you're under the current form, whether it's the tax structure, what have you.
There you go.
There's only so much you can do,
Yeah.
and so did I ever feel bullied? Not for a single second on anything.
The most recent mayor did.
Well, that's his problem.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, we have different, and I very carefully chose my words. People have different leadership styles as to what you can accomplish and how you can achieve things under this current form of government. So my limitations when I was there were never, to me, coming from the city manager. They were coming from the lack of ability to find ways to fund things or move in directions we could otherwise go. But I never felt constrained by the city manager. In terms of the manager and the lack of evaluations or what have you, if you think that was the case, it was a matter of people were generally satisfied with the work he was doing under the circumstances. And I think he was doing phenomenal work given the amount of difficulty he had. We just don't have the ability to create a system that you really can aggressively go after certain areas under this form.
But what I
You can't
hear
ask him to
being
do it
expressed
because he's
around the
a-
table is that a well-intended, perhaps ill-informed individual could run for mayor and do better than what that city manager was doing.
I have not said that. I delineate these positions, I would see the mayor's position more as a leadership position. Where I'm struck, and the manager being in charge of management, day-to-day operations, with the direction of coming from leadership through the mayor and council. But you have to have some power and ability to lead. I would, I don't want to be talking about myself. But what I'm saying is, I think I tried to come up with as much in terms of leadership out of the position that I could creatively and find a way to work with the manager and council. Others aren't going to do that, and it is extremely limiting and frustrating the way it's currently structured. I am saying that I support a full-time mayor, but I want to try and find a way to limit that to a leadership role that can be effective. And where I'm struggling is, how do you give an effective leadership role? And I think I was hearing it from Flaren too. He's got to be able to get the job done. He's got to be able to execute. That's where I need to work this through still in my analysis of this entire situation.
Okay, I have no problem with any of that, other than definition of execute and some ways of implementing
Well, I'm saying
leadership.
I'm having the same problem you are.
Okay. Because there are many companies where people were in charge that they have to engage in extensive politicking internally just to achieve things. That they may even have the power to come down and say, I want you to do this, or, lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Well, and the kind of leadership we're talking about, though, is talking about sort of broad policy initiatives, which is, I can't envision, and just to be clear, I would never run for this job, whatever we decide anyway. But I can't envision a position where I, as mayor, would want to be able to fire the chief of police or the
City manager.
no, I can give you plenty of examples right now.
Public Works.
You don't want to jump that, okay.
No, but I think there's, short of, if I knew that some chief was being totally derelict in their duty, but then it's my job to say to the city manager.
That's
hey,
correct.
they're-
Yeah, you got a line of authority.
Well, that's where you can use the merit issues
Exactly.
to deal with it.
But I do think in terms of the policy initiatives that we're talking about, economic growth and representation on a grander scale, both through the state and national, the mayor has to be able to deliver. And that's where I am still working my way through this, to figure out what level of power we give.
But under our current form of government, the city manager could have fired the police chief with no say from the city council, correct?
And they hired them without saying city council.
That's what I'm saying. I just don't know where,
Yeah, so
I don't know where
that is
there's
right.
but I don't know where there's this automatic distrust
At
of
least
this
these other
elected
folks are
mayor.
elected, yeah.
Yeah,
At least
I
the
don't-
other folks are elected.
The city manager has all the power right now, and there's very little control over him other than firing him by 4 people in that room.
Okay, well,
So-
we're just talking about the mayor. Now, if
Yeah.
you want to talk about city manager, I'm not sure what my opinion is, because I really haven't thought about it.
Okay, well, I'm
Thought
saying
about
that,
the mayor.
that's, I'm just saying that in my mind, and I agreed with both directions here, to remind you. I don't know which one's best. I'm just saying we need to work through this debate. But if he's going to be in charge, at least you have checks and balances on him every 4 years. Whereas the city manager, depending on who you put in there, or that revolving door of many people you put in there, can take all those department heads with them and fire them and bring them in again every other time. Somebody's going to be able to hire and fire them.
Under
It's
the
not
current-
all,
under the
yeah,
current
it's not
form,
all
right?
a democracy to city council where it takes 4 votes for every single move within government. That would paralyze it. So, where is this balance? And I just don't see making the city manager out to be this ultimate person who has all
Okay.
these qualifications, who you're hiring and you're assuming they can do this all best.
I
on this
haven't,
pedestal.
I haven't passed judgment on the city manager yet, although I've stated the fact that I do believe that they are trained professionals, dedicated, usually in professional societies, they have code of
Well,
ethics and
there's
stuff
all
like
kinds
that.
of requirements that are in these
Correct,
charges
yeah,
for that.
whereas the mayor,
Mhm.
no.
Yeah,
Not-
except you can fire them every 4 years. Only difference.
But,
4
but,
years
the-
is a long time.
but you know what? There's no requirements for city council either.
Understood.
So,
He's just happy there's 7, so you know, he can't.
and city council has a, you know, although there's 7 of them or 6 or whatever, it has the added, disincentive that, that they're all part-time and very low pay.
Participative democratic government would probably go out of existence at some point if there were not qualified leaders dedicated to making sure that there was some sort of stability.
That's what, and I think you gotta have a little more faith in the voters to do that. And I'm going back to my defense of Joe Weekland here, because I think it needs said in light of some of these other comments. One thing Weekland did incredibly well was he hired good people. I mean, he put department heads in place that are fantastic people. There can be a situation to put yes men or patsies in this position where you're worried about, and that's where the threat could come from. If you have a real strong city planner, or a real strong even chief of police, they're the folks that most likely can knock off the city manager from within. Weekland, at least with the power he had, hired great people, which was why I'm less concerned about the overall management of the city in a city manager. And my problem with the city manager is they're restricted by that job on the policy side and on the risk-taking side. The way it currently, there's no incentive for the city manager to take a risk under the current form of government. Somehow we need to interject, you know, that ability to take on those types of.
The title itself of manager is somebody who carries out actions, perhaps even identified or mandated by somebody else. They're a city manager. They're not, my impression is they're not leaders, so to speak, the dynamic leader that you're thinking about. It never would be my expectation that the city manager, Joe Weekland or anybody else, would be independently going down to Harrisburg to do anything other than comply with some
Look at the first 3
expectations.
city managers that were hired. That's the kind of people that, I mean, I don't want to be paring anybody down, but the initial city managers were much more aggressive on that, and they wound up getting fired pretty quickly.
I didn't know any of those people.
Okay,
I
well,
never experienced that.
Since we only have 10 minutes left, I just want to bring it full circle here. This is the reason I sort of provoked this conversation, because I can't imagine coming to next meeting with specific provisions we want to put in this when I assumed this was how the conversation was going to go, as far as we're not anywhere even close to knowing the structure to build those provisions around.
Well,
that's why I wanted to sort of have this discussion a little bit this evening.
That's good, and it's a good discussion.
Because I could bring, you know, if we decided to go, if 5 of us said executive branch, that's the only way we're going, then you could come loaded for bear with executive branch next time. If 5 people in here, or 6 people said, you know, we want to keep basically the same structure, just go full time, we could start to work in that direction next time. But, you know, I heard no clear consensus, and some people were quiet as to which direction we are going to go next time. So I think to try to flip through this book and say, yeah, that sentence sounds good, let's put that into our charter as a roughing out of this, the mayor and the city manager powers, it's not going to happen next time until we get past the large bullet points of this discussion. I mean, I don't even know what to bring next time. No, we're not even close.
How
That's what I
will
wanted
we
to
achieve consensus on an issue like this?
Ultimately, I think people are going to come forward and say, here's what I propose.
What
That's
people?
If we all decide that we want an executive and you're one that doesn't,
Oh, okay, the people around the table. I didn't know whether you're talking about the general public, or I didn't know.
no, if we all decide that we want to go with the executive branch, and then let's hash out what that executive branch looks like, despite your objection to it, that's the way we move.
Okay.
Or if we want to say we want to keep the same form of government, we have now, how do we make that position
So,
stronger
in
and
other
more
words, it'll have to
full-time?
come down to a consensus vote.
Could we
Okay.
possibly come to the next meeting with the 3 different, like, could we assign 2 people to each one of those, and
Well,
then
you have-
present a case?
You have Richard and Bev in one group, and you have Dave and Heather in the other group, so
Well, I
there's
mean,
your 2
like, I
people
could
for
see
each.
Wayne, I could see Wayne as well, I mean, like, I could see an empowered mayor, not necessarily a strong mayor.
I don't know what that means either.
Semantics.
Yeah, but I mean, that's somebody saying, somebody at some point is going to say,
Well-
here's what I think's a good idea. And we're gonna refine it, change it, until we figure we have enough folks in the room to move forward.
Right.
If I may, because I'm not sure that I go with Richard's idea that it's either this or that and nothing in the middle. I'm kind of still hoping that maybe something in the middle.
Well, but I think you either gotta start with a full-blown executive branch and see how you're gonna whittle away that power, between that division of power between city council and that mayor. So you gotta start there and bring it back and give council more. Or you gotta start with him as part of city council, and how can we enumerate powers beyond what the current mayor has in our current form of government? You gotta start from one of those 2 directions.
Oh, yeah, and I think the direction that maybe I would, I don't know, I mean, I've already looked at these and, highlighted a bunch of passages, I'm sure, some of you have as well. Anyway, I'll come with some.
And I just wanted to throw a different wrinkle into it as well. Just a little bit off to the side with council. I'm not convinced that we need 7 council persons. I really think the court could do the job with a mayor. That's my thoughts. I mean, I think
What kind of mayor?
that I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
I'm kind of on the
You're
fence
saying
tonight.
4, you have
I
to be part of
think it's
council.
4.
He has to be part of
Mayor has to be
council. I agree there.
There you go.
That doesn't necessarily mean he's strong or the other
Okay.
way, but I'm thinking 4 could do it in the size of our city.
4 plus 1.
Correct.
Do you have any opinion on, board elections versus at large?
Here's a thought, and I'm totally not set on this, so I really am asking this, is what do you think about if the mayor is part of the council, about being part of the council occupying a substantial amount of his time so that he's not able to go and, let's say, wheel and deal?
I think they do it part-time, so if he's part of council, it's not that much more.
Right.
And would already know and be intimately involved to probably a greater degree than any of the councilmen already are.
And the job he'd be doing, he may be the one that's more actively presenting things to council almost than being reactive. He probably
That's
would be more
exactly
proactive.
right. I mean, that's why we're worrying too much a little bit here. You're still gonna have to get to whatever the number is, whether it's majority of 5 or majority of 7.
But he has to have some kind of authority if he's going out and, meeting and greeting and
But then,
Harrisburg.
you're right.
Even in meetings with developers, let's say there's a project coming in, we have an opportunity to pull it into the city. Those meetings are confidential. I mean, that's not something he's gonna be able to come to council and talk about.
But you're gonna
Typically,
have to
that's-
know what you can deliver.
That's right.
If you're the
He has
mayor,
to
you're gonna
have-
know,
that's
my
exactly
group will
right.
support this, I can put together enough for
Right.
this or not.
He has to have at least some kind of authority to be able to come to the table and say, here's what we can offer, because it isn't gonna be something that he can just, call Bill Kibler about and talk about. Doesn't
Right.
happen that
But
way.
no, but what I'm suggesting is it's a two-way. When you're going into that meeting as the mayor, you need to have your ducks lined up in a row saying, I know that I can deliver votes for this. I don't know that I can deliver votes for that. I want them to have some power,
Right.
but they're still gonna have to be able to build a consensus because.
Eventually,
my
they
vision-
will be at that point, but
Exactly.
when
Well,
they're in
like for
those
instance,
meetings.
right now with the pending, last time we heard about the Miz and the Chris is potentially coming down the road. You're going to
Those are
have the
examples.
potential for some very large projects to come to the city. What if there's like an eminent domain issue involved? You're going to need somebody who wants to stick their neck out on the line and fight with city council and part of city council, be the person going with the developer and really put their neck on the line to bring a project like that to the city,
That's
which
what
would
it takes.
obviously be very controversial and so.
But that person's
some
also
ways.
going to, in my view, still gonna have to, if they're gonna wanna pursue your eminent domain issue, they're gonna have to say, well, I need to get a we're gonna leave
You
it at
still
7.
need council, yeah.
Exactly.
I agree with that.
And so I need to be able to work it out in advance so that I've got my votes lined
Well,
up.
my question would, a city councilman, let's leave the mayor out, would a city councilman necessarily be willing to go spearhead that same sort of
No,
initiative?
not under what we're talking
No,
about.
so I'm saying you need that strong personality who's going to be willing to put his neck on the line for his career, political career in a sense, however
All I'm
established
saying
that
is,
is.
I don't believe it's one
Oh,
person.
no, but I think it's the
willy-nilly,
vision of one person, the lightning rod of one
Amen.
person,
Yep.
with the city council support he knows he has quietly behind him.
Right.
And that's the way those things end up happening, and you either get voted in or voted out, and the project goes.
I don't think it's this omnipotent, crazy guy running everything. It's gonna be somebody who's got some leadership skills, who also has the political side, but he realizes I've gotta bring other people, I gotta be able to get the floor.
Yeah, having vision and political skills and, negotiating and all that, I have no problem with that. That's leadership. It's a matter of how much.
And that's why you have a city manager as your assistant to manage the city at your direction.
Yeah,
A professional person at your direction who does that, and then you do this. But if you're doing that, you still have that manager that you're still overseeing, and he
Well,
needs to,
I'm
in
beginning
some
to,
ways.
yeah, it's becoming clearer in my head that there is leadership and there's management. Okay? Now, I've been around a long time, and I've been in different positions, and I really haven't thought of myself in a managerial position as a drone bureaucratic manager, okay? So I'm having a little bit of trouble thinking that we have city people who are managers sitting around just, doing that bureaucratic thing, as opposed to being able to provide leadership as well.
But let me give you an example. If you're the mayor providing leadership, you want to be able to say, I think, to your city manager, hey, the way things are going, the way I want to implement some things, we need to find a way to merge the fire department and the codes department so we can use the firemen for code. Just using an example again.
Okay, yeah.
It would be the manager's job to sort of implement that.
Now you
find
go
a
to
way-
council, you just go to council, you get enough votes, and then you tell the manager, here's what we want.
At some point, Dave, the private sector model breaks down because you're not doing it for profits in the public sector. At some point, even the bureaucrats in your position are trying to maximize profits for yourself, investors, whoever owns the company. It's different here. You're trying to be frugal, assuming good intentions, with the people's money, but there's not the same incentive to turn a profit. So at the end of the day, you're given a budget, you're trying to operate within that budget, you're not trying to maximize profits
What's
beyond
that
that.
skin in the game?
Yeah.
No skin in the game.
Correct.
Well,
I
I
mean, you're not getting some huge bonus because you did something extra great this year. So at some point, you can try to run it as a business, but at some point, it's a different type of incentive structure. It's a different type of people who get into that line of work. Unfortunately, that's the case. I mean, bureaucrats go into bureaucratic jobs as opposed to the private sector. Some people go back and forth, but I mean, that's generally the vision. And people go into politics who are different than people that go into to lead businesses. It's just, unfortunately, the nature of the beast.
Setting the expectations too for, we listen to all the department heads and Chief Freeling and Tim Helm, and one of the things that I remember from both of them is how creative they've gotten on finding funding because they didn't have the budgets anymore. So they took it upon themselves. They were forced to it, but you listen to some of the other department heads when we talked to them and said, have you been able to seek out other funding and things, realizing that maybe you don't want to be groveling for it. No, I didn't have time, or no, I don't have any. So there was really, we've got some department heads that have really become creative and looking for other ways. They didn't just settle. So there has to be different expectations so that everybody rises to the challenge, and that's not happening.
And we should all rejoice in the fact that we finally have two commissioners that are starting to look at getting us out of trouble, which we wouldn't be in the first place, but wouldn't have been for them.
I've interviewed all three of them. It's not like three commissioners to me.
Well, I don't think the third one agreed. He simply went along with it.
I don't know what you're talking about. So.
I think maybe it's just because the county budget's hitting a wall.
But all put into place right by the time that this is all.
Two of the three agreed.
Well, when we started 2 minutes late, and we're ending 2 minutes early.
Excellent,
2 minutes late.
excellent
So,
management.
leadership review. We are out of time. Where are we? Discussion time. Any public comment?
Yeah, as a resident sitting here listening to all this, it sounds to me like we need to hire a business manager. Let things run like they are, because they are running. We are getting $1 out of 50 cents worth of money coming in right now. We need someone that can go out and do all the things that you're talking about, bring in the money. If he brings in a lot of money, or her, pay them a lot of money. Okay? One of the problems that Altoona has, I noticed when I come back in 2000, is I said, how do you run your business? We don't run a business, we run a city. That's stuck with me. Everything's a business. So you're going around here and, you know, being involved with the city for 10 years now, I think, and being involved with all the departments, I think everybody's doing yeoman's duty for what they have. We just need more money coming in. So you need a business manager to bring in money. That's all I have to say.
Any other public comment?
Yes, we need, I'm new here, but I lived in other cities, okay? Los Angeles and other places.
Who are you?
My name's Dave English,
Okay, Dave.
okay? And one thing I've noticed, okay, there's been a long procession from where the strong mayor was in the old form of government. And one of the biggest problems there, okay, and I moved back here in '77, there was no insulation between the mayor and the police department on the day-to-day running of that department, okay? There was corruption. The police department looked horrendous out in the field. They had cars that shook apart, okay? Even Altoona Mirror wrote about it, okay? Do we want to go back to that? You know, the mayor, yeah, I agree with a strong mayor, but there has to be an insulation between the day-to-day running of government. When a mayor can tinker with personnel problems on his own, that's a problem. And I don't want to see the city go back to that.
I don't think it's anywhere close to that happening. Any other comment?
Yeah, I heard a lot of excellent points brought up here, but there's a lot of support and confusion. Well, I should say there's a lot of confusion in the way different people were thinking of these terms. And I'm saying that from my own experience.
Pardon me.
I'm sorry, I'm Jan Mills, Maltuna. I first met the former city manager when he worked in the planning department, City Hall, under Mayor Bill Stauffer. That's how long our relationship went back. I think he was a very good city manager. And yes, we had a little public spat there one time. Well, he did. I didn't. I sat there and listened. But the point is, that did not taint my opinion of him as a city manager. He was a good city manager. I also like the fact that, though, we have professionals running our departments. The city manager doesn't run the departments. He holds them accountable. That's his job. But we have some really good professionals, and I've met every one of the department heads. I've evaluated them on my own, and I think they do an excellent job. So I like the city manager aspect, to hold them accountable, give them direction, which the city manager gets direction from the council from time to time, but not a lot, because that's not the council's job. The council is to look out for the direction that the city's headed, and if they see where the city manager can play a role in that, then they take action to convey that to the city manager. But I never saw any real problem with that while I sat on council. The city manager was open, he listened. Yes, yeah, we had some disagreements, but I like disagreements, because the disagreement challenges you to think of what you think is right. He may not be right, or you may not be as right as you think you are. So those are the good aspects of the disagreements. Now, having them out of control or, you know, just flamboyant type things, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about serious disagreements. One of the things you said about the Easton's charter, and it seems to be a consensus, that seems to be the more reasonable one to use as a model. I would like to see you adapt something saying we're going to use a modified Easton's template. In other words, that's your pattern, and then you can use it to test the things you want to consider back and forth. If you want to add something to that, that's the modification. If there's something on there that doesn't appeal to you, that's what I think you as a group should do. Clean that up and use that as your model. And then that's the criteria that your new charter has to meet. You got these, one time I heard you say 11, another time I heard you say 9. I haven't seen the Easton Charter. I have the Allentown Charter.
I said 11, but I just misread it.
Well, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying whatever that number was. I heard different numbers. But that's the points that you want to incorporate or include into your charter that you want to develop. It doesn't matter whether it's Easton's, one from Allentown, one from Sequoia, or whatever. You know, it doesn't really matter. But I think that's the right direction. I like that approach, because why reinvent the wheel? And if there is something as you learn more about it you don't like, you get rid of it. And if it's something you like but should be modified, you modify it. That's simple. As far as that mayor, somebody said about the mayor running on this platform. I don't think you need a strong mayor. I think you need a defined mayor. What I'm saying by that, I think you need to define the duties and roles of a mayor beyond what they presently are to address the things you need. And you pay them extra for that. I think that's only appropriate. And I think if you want somebody full-time, and I think that makes sense, that would be your business manager too, because he's going to go out and meet with these groups and organizations and other communities, or even via the internet. It doesn't matter how he meets with them, but he reaches out and finds out what's available to help this city. And that's some of the types of things you need to define in his job. As far as, I would not want to duplicate services. For an example, if you're going to have a city manager run the departments, and I don't mean run them, that was a lousy choice of words, hold them accountable. That's what I should have said. If you want to have him hold them accountable, you don't want the mayor going in there interfering with those departments. That's why you have the professionals. You have the chief of police, the fire chief. And hey, look at the records, folks. I check them I check them more than once a year, let's put it that way. We have two of the highest rated municipal police authorities and fire authorities in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we also have, in my opinion, a terrific Department of Public Works. And you know what? That police department and that fire department aren't worth a crap without a good public works department providing them a way to get to where they got to go. So let's not forget that. I think we also need, and again, I'm a constitutionalist, and not by registration, but by that's where I grew up. That's where I'm committed to. And so the things that are defined in our Constitution, I'll give you the assimilation in the city, and that's to protect and serve. So that's your police department and your fire department, and neither one of them can do their jobs without a good public works department. So when we talk about money, I'm not for spending a penny of city council money, or city money, on recreation. For instance, our parks and things. I love our parks. I think we should have them. I think we should have the Recreation Commission. But I think that should be the public sector should fund those, so that the monies that we have we can put towards those three things I just described, and that's our police and our fire protection, which are excellent, as well as our public works that support both of those operations. Then, as far as, we have I should mention, so we have a good water system here. We have the top-rated water system in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But that's an authority that is an authority on purpose, and that's so the politicians can't stick their fingers into it. It runs on its own. Hey, there's some criticisms I have of the water authority, But let's not get that confused with the city. You guys are charged with giving the city new direction. I think you got your act together. I think you're all heading in the right direction. And I like your attitude. I really do. Love your attitude. Because that's what's going to make the difference.
Appreciate it.
Didn't mean to take so much of your time.
Any other comments? Good, we're running late, but good discussion and time well spent, so, more to come 2 weeks from now. In that time,
Something right about arguing.
Very good. No,